Today on the Roosevelt Reagan channel, we're gonna do something right before I make my inevitable video comparing the differences between the movie adaptation and the book Forrest Gump. But before we do that, I saw this video a bit ago by Mr. Beat it's two separate videos going over the greatest accomplishment and greatest mistake of every president. It was going fine until he said that Reaganomics was Ronald Reagan's greatest mistake. And that upsets me. I do not like that. In fact, I really hate that. And he spouted off a bunch of nonsense about Reaganomics. And I was so upset by this, I'm decided, fine. If I don't like it so much, I'll make the video myself. But instead of separating it into two videos, I'm just gonna have each president, I'm going to say the greatest accomplishment and biggest mistake all in the same video. And now, without further ado, let's just get this started. George Washington, his greatest accomplishment is pretty easy. He's setting up the president of the presidency. Like no other president could do anything if it wasn't for George Washington. He laid the groundwork for everything. We owe everything to George Washington. The fact he said no to being a king was incredible for this country and its future. We owe it all to George Washington. His greatest mistake, though, was relying way too much on Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton, very bad ideas. His ideas of bigger government after we just had a revolution against big government, not a fan of that. Should have relied more on Jefferson, if you ask me. John Adams, his greatest accomplishment was being able to keep peaceful relations with France and preventing a war. I'm not the biggest fan of war. If I feel a war is unnecessary, if there's going to be a war, the president should do everything he can to avoid it. And Adams did just that. So good on you, John. Greatest mistake's quite easy. The Alien Sedition Act. One of the worst precedents to set by a founding father to go after people for speaking freely and deporting a bunch of people. I don't like that. Very terrible. Very no good. No good. It's the reason why a lot of people rank John Adams lower purely for it. It was just horrible. One of the worst laws in American history. Maybe just be the worst law in American history. For Thomas Jefferson, he had a lot of accomplishments as president. He repealed the Alien Sedition Act. He repealed the whiskey tax and all the unnecessary taxation levied upon the American people by John Adams. And George Washington, he got rid of it all, freed those wrongfully arrested, lowered the debt, banned the importation of slaves, which was the right move for eventual emancipation. So, out of all those accomplishments, I feel like his greatest is easily the Louisiana Purchase. Millions of people, including me, live in the territory that Thomas Jefferson bought. And he bought it. No, did not do it through war. And no conflict. He did through peaceful relations with France because he had some pretty talented statesmen like Robert Livingston, the ambassador to France, James Monroe, and James Madison is up in there negotiating it. It was definitely the least shady land dealing we've ever had was the Louisiana Purchase. It was definitely his greatest accomplishment. James Madison. Now, I'm a very big fan of James Madison, and sometimes I feel like I'm one of the only ones. Now, his greatest accomplishment was leading America to the era of good feelings. Oh, wait, hang on. I forgot to talk about his greatest mistake. Oh, it's the Embargo Act. Okay, now back to James Madison. His greatest accomplishment was his leadership during the War of 1812, made it so that the American people felt like they won the war. After victories at Fort Wayne, New Orleans, and decimating the Native American enemies and the British out in the West. These victories were very much needed after the burning of the Capitol. In fact, James Madison still displayed strong leadership, kept us together, kept us determined, and we stuck the landing of the War of 1812. And that strong leadership made the country far more united and happy. It led to the era of good feelings. The most united we've ever been. Madison got the ball rolling for it. We owe a lot to Madison. Our national anthem, ode to Madison. the continuation of the Jeffersonian policies that benefit us today. We should thank Jefferson for it, but Madison continued it, so that's pretty good. If you like Andrew Jackson, you should thank Madison, because there is no Andrew Jackson without the War of 1812 in New Orleans. So if you are Jacksonian, you owe a lot to Madison. The Bill of Rights of the Constitution, well, he wasn't president, so those don't count. But Madison was a great man and a better president than people give him credit for. His biggest mistake was starting the War of 1812. It's pretty bad. The White House burned down. The British took over the Capitol. That was bad. But not bad enough for me to make him think of him as like one of the worst presidents. I just don't think that. I feel like one of these days I'm going to have to make a video defending James Madison, because I'm just the most vocal defender of James Madison. Madison was great, dagnabbit. The hate is unnecessary. Unnecessary! John Adams is the worst founding father president, not James Madison. Now, James Monroe, his greatest accomplishment was leading us through the era of good feelings. The most united we've ever been was under his leadership. That's good. Biggest mistake was the Missouri Compromise. It was the first ever step that would lead to the Civil War. So that's bad. That's what keeps him out of being he is one of the best presidents, but that keeps him from being better. John Quincy Adams. Biggest accomplishment? I guess some of his ideas on infrastructure is pretty good. If you have crappy infrastructure and you fix it, that's good. Biggest mistake was tariff abominations. It led to the nullification crisis. It was the first big Civil War scare and secession scare we had. It was thanks to John Quincy Adams. Granted, he didn't have to deal with it. Andrew Jackson had to. He also got the ball rolling on the spoils system, because when he hired his buddy Henry Clay, who got him the presidency, got him a job as Secretary of State. In those days, if you gave someone the Secretary of State, that's basically you're saying he's going to be my next president. He's going to be the next president. As a reward for giving him the presidency after robbing it from Andrew Jackson. A lot of people blame the spoils system for Jackson. If anything, John Quincy Adams kind of got the ball rolling on it. Andrew Jackson, his greatest accomplishment is easy. He paid off the national debt. That's just so unbelievable with how big it is now. That's never going to happen again. But Andrew Jackson did it. That's good. His biggest mistake was obviously the Indian Removal Act. It ruins his reputation even today. What prevents a lot of people from liking Andrew Jackson is the Trail of Tears. So that's bad. That's very, very bad. Martin Van Buren did not have a lot of accomplishments. He's one of the worst presidents. But I don't remember what it was, but it was some kind of war he ended. I guess that's good. His biggest mistake was his very poor leadership during the Panic of 1837. The worst financial crisis we ever seen at that point, and he just failed miserably. And that's bad. Oh, where'd he go? William Henry Harrison. He was only president for like 31 days. That's not a lot to do anything. I mean, his greatest accomplishment, he gave a banger inaugural address, I guess. Biggest mistake was trusting the DC water. He got sick and died. John Tyler. His greatest accomplishment was setting the precedent of what the vice president should do upon the president's death. That would lead to people like Theodore Roosevelt and Harry Truman being president. So good on you, Tyler. Biggest mistake? Alienating everybody, including the Democrats and the Whigs. He alienated everybody. That's bad. Made him very ineffective. Very mediocre to bad president because of that. Not good, Tyler. Polk gave us all more land than Jefferson ever did. The most land ever acquired by a president was him. And he kept all his promises, and was one of the most effective presidents in history. Probably the most effective. He did everything he wanted to in one term. That's impressive, Matt. That's impressive, Polk. Biggest mistake? Not saying what to do with the land, which would lead to the Civil War. Zachary Taylor? Biggest accomplishment? Got the ball rolling on California being a free state and fighting back against the slave states. Biggest mistake? Trusting the DC milk and cherries. He got diarrhea and died. Millard Fillmore, his greatest accomplishment was opening up trade with Japan. Having a new trading partner is good. Free trade is good. So thanks, Fillmore. Biggest mistakes, the Fugitive Slave Act. Created Civil War tensions. It was just wrong. It was just wrong and inhumane. Just round up all those escaped slaves, even the free ones. It was just bad. Franklin Pierce, greatest accomplishment was he paid over half of the debt. That's just nuts. Very effective financial policy. Biggest mistake, Kansas-Nebraska Act. It was the nail in the coffin for the Civil War. Buchanan, his greatest accomplishment is he kicked out the governor, Brigham Young. You know, Brigham Young was so bad he made Buchanan do something. That should tell you everything. He did a lot of screwed up things to the Mormons, despite being a Mormon. And just to everyone around him, and Buchanan had to get him out, and he did. His biggest mistake was, not doing anything as the biggest crisis in the nation was unfolding, and states were seceding. He did nothing. And also there was a financial crisis while he was president, the Panic of 1857. He did nothing. He's just the most useless president ever. Abraham Lincoln, he saved the country. There's no use in saving the slaves and freeing them. There's no country for them to be free in. So I feel like saving the country is more important. The biggest mistake was suspending habeas corpus. It was unnecessary and bad, though legal. Andrew Johnson, the only accomplishment this man had was purchasing Alaska, which is good, I guess. Biggest mistake was abandoning Lincoln's vision for the country after the Civil War. Grant is Civil War agenda. Helping out the blacks with the 14th and 15th Amendments, smashing up the Klan. Very good. Definitely one of the most underrated civil rights president, especially in the 1800s. It's impressive. Biggest mistake was all the corruption. Rutherford Hayes, the economic recovery under his leadership, and fixing some of the problems of the Grant administration and introducing civil service reform, it's definitely his greatest accomplishment. His biggest mistake, though, I guess withdrawing the troops from the South, that was pretty bad. But it was going to happen either way, and Grant was already doing it, so I don't think that's his greatest mistake. His greatest mistake was his whole image as a fraud compromise candidate and alienating those stalwart Republicans, the corrupt ones, and the Democrats, made it so that he really couldn't, and also alienating the radical Republicans for being more neutral on things, was not as effective as he could have been, though not entirely weak, but he could have done more, but he couldn't because, he alienated the stalwarts, the radicals, and the Democrats, so not much could really, he couldn't show his full potential, but the fact he did show a lot of greatness show you how he could have been a really banger president, but couldn't happen. Garfield, continuing Hayes' civil service reform was great precedent for the future of this nation in the battling of corruption. His biggest mistake was not giving Charles Guiteau a job because he shot him and killed him. Chester Alan Arthur, the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. He got Garfield's civil service reform agenda passed and managed to do it despite being created by all that corruption. He fought back against it. It was very good. Mistake, Chinese Exclusion Act. Exclude all the Chinese people. Very racist. Racism is no good. Grover Cleveland, one of the few presidents that limited the power of the presidency. Tried to limit the power of the government. Tried to go back on some of that Jeffersonian policy. It's very good. Biggest mistake was during the Panic of 1893 and some of the mistakes of the future administrations. He couldn't do anything about it. He was not effective enough to solve the problems. And plus he married his goddaughter. That's bad. Benjamin Harrison's greatest accomplishment, the Sherman Antitrust Act. Going after all those corrupt trust funds. That's good. Biggest mistake? His biggest mistake of his presidency was the McKinley Tariff, leading to the Panic of 1893, one of the worst financial crises of its time. So yeah, that's not good. And also, handing out Medal of Honors for troops that massacred a bunch of Indians. That's bad. McKinley, the economic recovery from the Panic of 1893. He managed to solve it. That's good. Biggest mistake, the American-Philippine War. A lot of atrocities. A lot of concentration camps. A lot of screwed up stuff. Very bad, McKinley. Roosevelt, greatest accomplishment, The Panama Canal. Free trade is good. Panama Canal helped out on that. Very good. Biggest mistake, what was it called? The Browntown Affair, when he fired all the black people because of some light accusation. The Browntown Affair, very bad. Very, he's supposed to be the progressive. That's not very progressive of him, Roosevelt. Everything else is pretty good, though. Taft, his greatest accomplishment, was busting up more trusts in one term than Theodore Roosevelt ever did. Biggest mistake was the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act. Alienated and divided the Republican Party, alienated the progressive wing of the party, from Roosevelt, the guy that got him elected, which would lead to the chaotic election of 1912, giving us Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, no, he had a great accomplishment. He gave women the right to vote. That's good. Expanding voting rights is always a good thing. Biggest mistake? The Espionage and Sedition Act. It's very bad. Can't just arrest people for speaking out, and also, jailing people like Eugene Debs, although he was no good, dirty socialist. Don't like socialism, but you can't just arrest him. That's bad. Very bad, Woodrow Wilson. Warren Harding, his biggest accomplishment was undoing some of that Woodrow Wilson nonsense. So good on you, Harding. His biggest mistake was all the corruption. Calvin Coolidge, greatest accomplishment was his limitation of the government and all the tax cuts, some of that pre-Reagan stuff linked to the Roaring '20s. Biggest mistake was not ending Prohibition. Prohibition sucks. Herbert Hoover? It's Herbert Hoover. Not many accomplishments come to mind. I guess he installed some pretty banger justices, so that's something. His greatest mistake was easily the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. And tariffs are just really bad. Granted, I'm not good at speaking. So, if you want to illustrate some of the points against tariffs, there's a certain person that is really good on talking about tariffs.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
Let the Gipper explain everything for me. FDR, greatest accomplishment, is leadership in World War II. Very good. For once, yet that actually led to the recovery of the economy after the Great Depression. Not that New Deal crap didn't do anything. It was World War II. So after 4 terms, he finally got the economy to recover. Had to break constitutional precedent set by George Washington. Had to violate that in order to do it. But you win some, you lose some. His biggest mistake was easily the internment of innocent Japanese people, which Reagan gave some money in reparations to and apologized to. It takes Ronald Reagan to do it. Harry Truman, Missouri boy, but much better than FDR, if you ask me. Greatest accomplishment is easily the Marshall Plan. Prevented World War III and just helped millions of people. Biggest mistake was the unnecessary war in Korea, which led to all that tension in that area today. Dwight Eisenhower's biggest accomplishment was having a balanced budget every year of his presidency. I like that. Not even Ronald Reagan could do that. It's a shame, but you win some, you lose some. Biggest mistake was having the CIA overthrow various democratically elected leaders, and especially in countries like Iran, which would lead to various disasters in the future in that region. But at the end of the day, I like Ike. JFK, he got cut short after 3 years. It's not. I guess that's enough. His biggest accomplishment was preventing nuclear war. His biggest mistake was almost causing nuclear war. LBJ's greatest accomplishment is the Civil Rights Act, which, at JFK did all the hard work for. But, he passed it. That's something. Biggest mistake was the Vietnam War and the Great Society. Very ineffective policies. War on poverty. Still poverty. All those issues he tried to help, still very much prevalent today. Barely did anything to help. The Vietnam War, the most unnecessary war ever, and was biggest failure. Bad. Richard Nixon, greatest accomplishment was all the moon landings happened while he was president. His biggest mistake was probably a tie between starting the war on drugs and the Watergate. Had to resign because of this corrupt spying on enemies like that. No good. Gerald Ford. The Privacy Act of 1974, one of the few times the government actually tried to protect the privacy of its citizens. Thanks, Gerald Ford. Biggest mistake, though. Pardon Richard Nixon was probably for the best, though. Get the country to heal itself faster. In spite of being unpopular, it was necessary, so that's definitely not his biggest mistake. His biggest mistake, probably not the best foreign policy, the fall of Saigon and various foreign policy blunders. So that's probably his biggest mistake. Jimmy Carter's greatest accomplishment was the deregulation of oil, trucking, what was the other ones? Airlines and railways. All that would eventually lead to the economic recovery that wasn't seen until, his successor. And his successor had to expand on that deregulation until it can actually work. And then he would deregulate more, which, helped the economy. But, he got the ball rolling on it. He deserves credit. Good on you, Jimmy. The biggest mistake was his ineffectiveness in the Iran hostage crisis. Don't really need, over 400 days. They were trapped there. Could have been out way sooner if someone more effective foreign policy guy was there. Now we get to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan, very great president. Great president. Fantastic president. One of definitely the greatest modern president ever. None of these bums after him stand a chance. Let's see here. His greatest accomplishment. Now, despite what some might tell you, might tell you it's his greatest mistake. But that's not his mistake. It's his greatest accomplishment. Reaganomics worked. And it still works. And it only doesn't work because people don't use it right. They try to do it, but then they raise tariffs. And that doesn't work. They do all this other stuff. They just can't handle it. Only Reagan made it work. Because Reagan's the master. Reagan's a master. He's the man. He's the man. Reaganomics are this basic foundation that just people need to know more.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Reaganomics understood that and undid some of that nonsense. Cut taxes that made it so people could actually have money and and actually go out and buy things and start businesses. cutting back on regulations that made it harder for them to grow their business, allowing the economy to actually, work. One of the greatest economic recoveries and economic booms in history was because of this man. It was great. It was very, very great. Renewed the American spirit and renewed confidence. People felt safe felt economically safe again. People felt better off than they were 4 years ago. It was easier to buy things than it was 4 years ago. America was more respected than it was 4 years ago. When he said, let's make America great again, he actually did make America great again. His speeches that he would give defending some of the stuff made it all make sense, man. Median income went up by 12% across the board, not just for the rich. A lot of people think he just benefited the rich. No, it didn't. Income went up by 12% for everyone. Everyone. Manufacturing, for a guy that's people that think tariffs help manufacturing went up by 33%. So, tariffs, useless. Proves that. With this newfound American strength, allowed the ending of the Cold War. This man ended the Cold War after a lot of the presidents after him couldn't do a thing about it. He managed to do it because he was willing to do the things no one else was. He was brave enough to do it.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Now, I think we should get on to his biggest mistake. There's very few mistakes for the Reagan administration. Very few. And pretty minor mistakes that don't really matter don't really matter that not big a deal, don't hurt them as much as people think they do. AIDS crisis? Nah, that ain't it. It was very unknown at the time. There's not much he could have done, but the fact he still did things about it, proving that, wasn't that bad. War on drugs, Richard Nixon started that. It's really mainly, if you want to blame someone, mainly put the blame on him. Increase the debt. Tons of other presidents increased the debt. A lot of other presidents raised the debt more than him. So it's not that big a deal. Abraham Lincoln's one of our greatest presidents, and he increased the debt more. So you don't give him flack for it, yet you give Reagan the flack for it. And that debt led to the end of it was necessary to end the Cold War. It was necessary. It was a small price to pay for world peace, which, seemed possible because of this man. Well, then we shortly realized that wasn't going to be the case. But, we felt like it was going to happen because of this man. So it's not the war on drugs, it's not the AIDS crisis, it's not the debt. None of those, I feel, are not his greatest mistakes. And they're not even that big a deal. The mental institutions, yeah, that's pretty bad. That just might be it. But I feel like there's one more. It was the Iran-Contra affair. They're very bad. Technically high treason. It was totally justified, though. Gotta get the communists out. Just a bunch of freedom fighters needed some money. They're just like George Washington and the Continental Army. They needed help. Reagan was willing to help them, though he did it the wrong way. So, maybe not the best, but most of it was behind his back with Oliver North and H.W. Bush. So it's not really even his fault, but it's still definitely his greatest mistake. But even then, his greatest mistake doesn't hurt him that much. Just goes to show you how great Ronald Reagan was. Ronald Reagan was awesome. Ronald Reagan, man. And, I think I ought to let Reagan explain himself.
My fellow Americans, I have spoken to you from this historic office on many occasions and about many things. The power of the presidency is often thought to reside within this Oval Office. Yet it doesn't rest here. It rests in you, the American people, and in your trust. Your trust is what gives a president his powers of leadership and his personal strength. And it's what I want to talk to you about this evening. For the past 3 months, I've been silent on the revelations about Iran. And you must have been thinking, well, why doesn't he tell us what's happening? Why doesn't he just speak to us as he has in the past when we've... My heart and my best... Let's start with the part that is the most controversial. I find secret bank accounts and diverted funds. I am still the one who must answer to the... First, let me say I take full responsibility for my own actions and for those of my administration. As angry as I may be about activities undertaken without my knowledge, I am still accountable for those activities. As disappointed as I may be in some who served me, I am still the one who must answer to the American people for this behavior. And as personally distasteful as I find secret bank accounts and diverted funds, well, as the Navy would say, this happened on my watch. Let's start with the part that is the most controversial. A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. As the Tower Board reported,
Yep. Innocent. Well, not really, but Reagan's still the man. Okay, H.W. Bush. Greatest accomplishment? The Americans with Disability Act is pretty good. Pretty good. If you're disabled, thank George H.W. Bush for having some things in life that make it easier for you. Biggest mistake, the whole no new taxes thing, but then raise taxes. Boo. Bill Clinton? Balanced the budget. So far, they're the latest president to do such a thing. That's very good. Biggest mistake, not being able to keep it in his pants with his interns, and not, his wife, and got impeached for it. And, defamation, doing criminal things to cover it up. He may not have had sexual relations with that woman, but he did. W. Greatest accomplishment, he threw one mean first pitch. Biggest mistake, Patriot Act. Boo. Obama. He withdrew the troops from Afghanistan. That's good. Not from Iraq. He withdrew the troops from Iraq, but not Afghanistan. But the ones in Iraq, that was good. Biggest mistake, he put the bomb in Obama and bombed a bunch of people. Innocent people, mostly. With occasional terrorists here or there. That's bad. Joe Biden. Donald Trump's right here. Joe Biden. Greatest accomplishment. He finally withdrew the troops from Afghanistan. Went horribly. He did the one thing everyone's been promising for 20 years that they never did, but then he did. It went horribly, though. That's why it's as big of a mistake. All those innocent American troops that died needless deaths when they're being shipped to their dignified transfer, you know what Joe Biden was doing? He was staring at his watch, feeling uninterested for the deaths that he caused through his own failures. That's disrespectful, and as his commander-in-chief, that's just bad. I hate it. Donald Trump, greatest accomplishment? He did some prison reform stuff. That's pretty good. Biggest mistake? Tariffs. Hate him. And, that's all the presidents. Now, if you disagree with me, you probably do. There's probably some you disagree with me more than others, especially him. But I guess you can let me know. You know what? That's all I have to say about that.